The Miami Dolphins defense has hit its first bit of adversity for the 2023 season, with quarterback Jalen Ramsey going down with a meniscus injury that will put him on the shelf for an indeterminate amount of time.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. It is technically Thursday evening. This is our first Friday show for Friday, July 28th, 2023. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Dolphins your first Miami Dolphins listen of the day. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting with Joe Marino, and very clearly not in my regular setup for those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Because I am in Miami Lakes right now and will be until Tuesday for coverage of the Miami Dolphins practices. And I would like to be the first to file a formal apology for the Jalen Ramsey news, because last year when I came down to camp, while I was at camp, we got the news that the Dolphins had been stripped of a first and third round draft selection as punishment for the allegations that came out from the Brian Flores suit. This year, I'm on the plane, and Jalen Ramsey goes down with a knee injury at the end of practice, defending Tyreek Hill on a ball down the field that was a contact situation. So you felt optimistic that it wasn't a non-contact situation where there'd be potentially this looming ligament damage that you'd have to keep your eyes out for. And the plane takes off. I fly cheap, so I flight on Frontier and didn't have Wi-Fi on the plane. So you land, and I turn the airplane mode off, and I'm expecting an update. We don't have an update. Well, the update finally comes through. Jalen Ramsey ACL is intact. That's good news. His season's not over. That's also good news. But he does have a meniscus tear that needs a repair, and he is scheduled for surgery tomorrow/today, depending on when you listen to the show. He's scheduled for surgery on July 28th. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that are still to be determined, but what I can immediately tell you, and I'm not going to you-know-what on you and call it rain. It sucks. It absolutely sucks that Jalen Ramsey, with the familiarity that he had with the scheme, with his star power, with his ability to make impact plays, with his presence on the football field, with the championship pedigree that he brings to the Dolphins, day 2 of camp, before you even put pads on for the first padded practice, Ramsey goes down with a knee injury and is going to miss a to-be-determined amount of time that ranges anywhere from, if it's just a cleanup and they clip it, 6 to 8 weeks, to potentially, depending on who you ask, between Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport right now, potentially through December, coming back at the beginning of December, probably right around after the Dolphins bye week would be my guess, if that's the timeline and they end up fully repairing the meniscus. So it's a gut punch for sure. It's unfortunate. Absolutely. Made the mistake of saying, wonder if anybody's going to blame Chris Greer for Jalen Ramsey's meniscus tear on a contact situation in practice. And sure enough, I wasn't let down. Already seen the tweets. Sick and tired of Chris Greer bringing in players that always get hurt, like Jalen Ramsey hasn't played 16, 12, 15, 16, 17 games throughout the course of his NFL career. You just never know when it's going to be your time. And I know a lot of Dolphins fans are pretty frustrated that it is, again, their time for an injury, when we've heard all offseason the Dolphins' ability to contend is going to be centered around their health. And that's factual. It's factual for all teams. You're going to be healthy at the right time of year. Now, Jalen Ramsey is in a position to potentially be healthy at the right time of year and be ready to be a significant contributor for the Dolphins down the stretch. Here's what I can't do. I don't have the bandwidth to sit here and feel sorry for myself. I went through the whole 5 stages of grief and kind of came to terms, because I guarantee you the 88 other players in the locker room, and the entire coaching staff, and everybody else with the organization, you don't play a football game for another 6.5 weeks. They can't sit around and feel sorry for themselves that Jalen Ramsey got hurt. So I'm not going to either. It stinks. It's super unfortunate. It's super disheartening. But we're going to talk about next man up. We're going to talk about the timeline for Jalen Ramsey. There's a lot of moving parts. And look, if you were going to have an injury like this take place, getting it as soon into the window of when you are back at camp so that you give yourself the opportunity, whether you do need the complete repair or if you do clip it, like if they clip it, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. Jalen Ramsey could be back for week 1. If they get in there and it's been reported that, they're not going to really determine what's going on and what they need to do until they get in there, if they end up needing to fully repair it, I mean, you're still talking probably 6-7 football games. You're talking 10 missed football games. If this happened in the beginning of October, you'd be done for the year. So there's the silver lining. I mean, silver linings right now are pretty crummy. We were all obviously very excited for Jalen Ramsey and are excited for Jalen Ramsey. But we'll let this play itself out. It stinks. There's no question about that. It's super disheartening. Felt like a gut punch when I first read the headline that they carted him off. We kind of played the wait and see game with the severity of the injury, and we'll play the wait and see game with what they ultimately decide to do with the procedure and the implications of that. But we got to talk about Dolphins schedule and timeline. We got to talk about the next man up for the Dolphins. We got to talk about how this Vic Fangio defense changes without Jalen Ramsey for whatever period of time they're going to be without Jalen Ramsey. There's a lot of things to get into, a lot of questions to explore, a lot of answers to find that for me, I just have a hard time. And yes, I'm tired of injuries too. I'm absolutely tired of injuries, but it doesn't do us any good, in my mind, to sit around and throw a pity party. So I'm not going to. And if you're in a different stage of grief, you have every right to do that. And I'm not going to tell you can't do that, but I'm going to tell you for this show and what we're going to do, I'm going to keep moving forward while also acknowledging that this stinks. But it doesn't do us any good to harp on the thing that we can't change. What the Dolphins can change and what the Dolphins can find is the answers for what comes next so that they can be best prepared to win as many football games as they can before Jalen Ramsey comes back. And that's what we're going to start to get into next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each and every week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft, scouting the waiver wire, every week we are going to be providing you with the players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. With draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who has Vinny picked out for us this week on eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Let's say you're in the market for a quarterback. And, Joe Burrow just had his own injury scare. It sounds like a calf issue. We acknowledged Justin Fields on Thursday. What about Trevor Lawrence? When the top-tier quarterbacks comes off the board in fantasy football drafts in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners who are guaranteed to fit your starting lineup every week, driving the sleeker Jaguars offense that now features Calvin Ridley at wide receiver. Trevor Lawrence has top 5 scoring upside as a QB1. Expect Lawrence to keep living up to his immense arm and athletic talent and cruise to production that builds off his hot finish to last season. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you build a championship caliber fantasy football team, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit, and the same goes for your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, there's over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips that you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. From air filters to brakes, batteries, taillights, alternator, shock struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what parts you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you'll know you're set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. So we kind of got into the timeline for Ramsey a little bit here. And if there was ever a day for me to be traveling, this was the perfect day, because you'd open up your phone and it's Jalen first sends the tweet, and then the news starts to break out, and then it's he's undergoing surgery, and then it's expected to miss some time, and then it's 6 to 8 weeks, and then Rappaport name drops December, and Schefter gives an update, and he says he might be ready for the beginning of the season. He probably going to miss the beginning of the season, but potentially even more. And it's just the chaos of all of it, with everybody trying to fill in the blanks. It was a great day for me personally to not be super plugged into my phone and to be able to get where I'm going in Miami Lakes, kind of debrief on everything, process the information, and say, okay, here's what we know. And one thing that I will tell you is, if it is clipped, you're talking probably a 6 to 8 week timeline, and that has been reported. And the regular season, is 6.5 weeks away. So if it's clipped, you would be living in a world where Jalen Ramsey could hypothetically, in the front end of that, be ready to play against the Chargers. If I had to guess, he'd probably miss 2 weeks, because then you'd have to get his strength and conditioning back up. So he'd probably, in my mind, in the best case scenario, he'd miss 2 weeks. If you look at the Dolphins' schedule, and you know those first 2 weeks are going to be at Los Angeles and then against the New England Patriots on the road before you come home and you play Denver in week 3. The first month, I think that there's 2 tough stretches that you identify for the Dolphins as tough stretches of their schedule. It's the first 4 weeks and the last 5 weeks. In a perfect world, you'd see Jalen Ramsey not get hurt. We don't live in that world anymore. It is what it is. In a perfect world, you'd see Jalen Ramsey in a non-perfect world, but an ideal situation for where we're at right now. You'd probably see him miss the Chargers game and then be ready to play 3 of the 4 games in that tough block that is at Chargers, at Patriots, home against Broncos, at Bills. That is a doozy 4-week start. 3 of them are on the road, and they're 4 AFC conference games. And you're home, Giants, Panthers, at Philadelphia, home against the Patriots, at the Chiefs. Then you have a bye week, and then it's November 19th. And then you play on Black Friday the same week. So I think there's 2 windows here that you're looking at for potentially a Jalen Ramsey in the world in which he recovers based off the estimated timeline for a complete repair of that meniscus in his left knee. Black Friday might be pushing it. And if Black Friday is pushing it, then you have Commanders December 3rd. Okay, then he'd be in a position to play 6 games if there were no issues the rest of the way. Commanders, home against Titans on Monday Night Football, home against the Jets, home against the Cowboys, at Baltimore, home against the Bills, whatever else could potentially come from there. I think there's games that you will and you won't miss Jalen. I don't think you'll miss him against the Raiders coming out of the bye. In a perfect world, in an imperfect world, that's the best case scenario of the worst case scenario as you keep working your way down. You come back from London, you rest up, and November 19th. I think that is, if we're going to circle an ambitious date on the calendar for where Jalen Ramsey returns for the Dolphins in the worst case scenario, you get 8 games plus whatever else comes. And in the 9 games ahead of time, I don't think you're really going to miss him against Carolina. I don't think you're really going to miss him against the Giants offense. I just don't think those teams have the skill players to really strain you. It's good if we're going to tell me you were going to play one of the AFC East opponents twice in a window before November 19th. I'd be glad to find out that it's the Patriots. That's the kind of matchup you can go a little bit heavier. You can play 3 safeties, and that kind of gets into some of the next men up that we're also going to talk about here as well, where I think you can stomach playing a little heavier with your personnel regardless. Now, there's a few things that we know, and one of the things that we know is we're going to find some stuff out about some guys. That's what we're going to start to explore here next on this episode of Locked On Dolphins is who are the next men up? Who's got to be ready to play some football now? The obvious low-hanging fruit here is Cam Smith. We're going to find out a lot about Cam Smith. This becomes one of the most important storylines of training camp. How ready is Cam Smith to step into a prominent role on the Dolphins defense? Because I'm going to be honest, I don't think you should be banking on Nick Needham anytime soon. He tore his Achilles last year. That's not a small deal. And it was closer to midseason. It's against Minnesota. So I'm mindful of that. Now, we have talked a lot about the embarrassment of riches that this team has in the secondary, particularly at corner. You have Xavier Howard. Okay? X, you're going to have to be that dude again. But we've seen you be that dude. Kader Kohou, I think, is your next obvious candidate to play outside. And I think that's where the dominoes get really interesting is we were expecting Jalen Ramsey to play this star position for up to probably 600 snaps this season. Who plays that? I think you can do some of it with your third safety being Deshaun Elliott. I think there's some of it you can do with him. I think there's some of it you can do with potentially Cam Smith from a coverage perspective. I think there's some of it you could potentially get from Trill Williams. I think there's some of it you could get from Kader Kohou. The question is, if you're going to do that, who's playing the other outside corner if Kader ends up being inside? That has to be Cam Smith. Now, here's the silver, I don't want to say the silver lining, but here's the mechanics of this Fangio defense and how it works that I think I don't think it changes much for X. Because Fangio's defense is all about split field coverages where we're going to play plus numbers and geometry against either side of the field. So if you're on the back side, aka the two-man side, there's probably going to be 2 eligibles, whether they're an empty and that's a tight end and a wide receiver, or you go 3x2, right? Even if it's 2x2 and the back is away from the passing strength. That backside corner gets a lot of man assignments, gets a lot of physicality that you can play cover 2 over top of it. And then to the passing strength, you'll see a lot more quads, which is cover 4 conceptually. And Fangio's defense quads is an actual call. But you see cover 2 and you see cover 4. When you're playing on the cover 4 side, you are really just playing a deep quarter of the field if you're in true cover 4. If you're going to play the zone match stuff, it's a lot of man lock where man outside and deep. They call it mod, right? And if the man releases outside of you, he's yours. You take all of them. If he goes deep, he's yours. There's all of them. But because of the safety tools that the safeties still have, the backside safety who's in the cover 2 side, he gets to hunt stuff working across the middle, which means the front side safety doesn't have to bail and chase routes breaking across the middle. And that means he can kind of hang back on the hash and help protect vertically against a young player if you've got a young outside corner to that side. And when we had Cody Alexander on the show, that's what he talked about. He said, if you really want to like get down into the progressions and figure out what this defense is doing at any given time, you got to start to the front, the passing, the strong side corner is going to tell you where to go because he's going to tell you the reads. Not a lot of NFL quarterbacks do that. And because of the structure, the zone structure, having a dude on the backside, in my mind, is much more important based on my understanding of the mechanics of the offense than having a dude to the passing strength who's going to have, you're playing 4-over-3. You're going to outnumber and effectively box everything. Now, having that dude in the nickel who can blitz, who can push flat, who can carry, who can fit the run, that's essential. And that's what Jalen Ramsey had the potential to be, as a really, really special player. And we hope that we see as much of that as possible. And if it's clipped, maybe we see it for 15 games. If they end up repairing the whole meniscus, hopefully we see it for 8 games. But this is another opportunity for young players in Cam Smith and Trill Williams and Kader Kohou to all help fill in the blanks as best as they can. Piecemeal it together, and maybe you'll see less penny front than what Vic Fangio was planning on doing. Maybe you'll see more of Jerome Baker and David Long as a pairing, taking some of those snaps. But for however long Jalen Ramsey's not a member of the Dolphins starting lineup because of his recovery window from this meniscus, you don't replace him with one player. This personnel grouping is this player. That personnel grouping is that player. Now, he can be an awesome boost down the stretch. And I saw Jalen's own tweet said that the late season run is going to be epic. And I hope he's right. But it certainly changes things for the Dolphins. And it puts pressure on the other cornerstone players. Now, the good news is you got a bunch of them. You got Jalen Phillips. You got Bradley Chubb. You got Christian Wilkins. You got Xavier Howard. You got Javon Holland. All of those players to varying degrees of being accomplished players and varying degrees of resumes and arguments throughout whatever their NFL careers are respectively to be cornerstone players. They're all capable of doing it. But Cam Smith becomes a major X factor. Cam Smith was kind of the cherry on top. Not anymore. Cam Smith becomes a critical piece of what is he ready for. Because, I think Nick Needham is probably going to stay on the PUP for the start of the active season. Think about Keon Crossan and Justin Bethel, and we saw what that looked like last year. Those guys aren't outside corners. They're not. Can Cam elevate to put Kader in a position to play the nickel? And here's why I would say I would probably prefer Kader in the nickel. Because stuff happens fast. It's an instinctual position, and Cam Smith's got really good instincts, and he did some of that at South Carolina. But at the same time, he's a rookie. If you put him in a position where he's protected vertically and he has help, I think Kader's got the goods to be the guy to bridge the gap as best as you possibly can. And then when you want a bigger player in there, you don't just say, oh, well, Jalen Ramsey's 205 pounds. We're fine. It'll be the same player. Then you got to turn to a safety. Will that be Trill Williams? Will that be Sean Elliott? We'll find out. We got about 6 weeks to figure out exactly what it's going to look like. So we'll see what else the Dolphins have up their sleeve. But that is going to do it for us on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. That's your team every day. I'll be at practice today to give you my insights from the Dolphins practice training camp, obviously, and then public practices start on Sunday. So busy time here in Dolphins land. Make sure you hit subscribe, follow along. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your evening. If you're watching or listening on Thursday night, you can find us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or if you're consuming on Friday, make it a great rest of your day. I'll be back again later today after practice to give you my thoughts there. Fins up.